Welcome back. African countries weathered a global economic financial crisis and drop in commodity prices in 2015. According to the World Bank, economic growth was set to slow in sub-Saharan Africa to 3.7% this year from 4.6% in 2014, the lowest since 2009. Even then, African countries made progress reducing poverty in the continent. The coming report looks at the highs and lows of the African economy in 2015.
2015 proved to be a tough year for Africa's economy, faced with a slowdown in export markets and a slump in commodity prices, particularly oil, putting robust economic growth rates in jeopardy. The tumbling value of local currencies threatened a debt crisis in sub-Saharan Africa, a report by think tank Overseas Development Institute warned, with Nigeria, Ghana and others facing a combined extra bill of $11 billion. Governments seeking to replace declining foreign aid and pay for infrastructure are also taking concessional funds from multilateral institutions, more expensive commercial bank loans and bilateral financing from lenders like China and Brazil. The report stated that no sub-Saharan country was in immediate danger of default, and most are largely financing themselves domestically, but the debt buildup was worrying.
Many countries are borrowing simply too much relative to the size of their economies, but secondly, governments are also borrowing in US dollars. In the last year, many African currencies have depreciated very sharply against the dollar, and that means the value of that debt in local currencies has grown. We've calculated it's grown by over $10 billion in the last year.
In Africa's biggest economy, Nigeria, the effects of a global oil price slump saw its economic growth drop to 5.54%, down from an estimated 6.23% for 2014. Nigeria's oil industry accounts for around 95% of the country's foreign exchange earnings. Along with the oil price slump, the Nigerian naira slid to a record low, stirring concerns about political stability and the central bank's ability to manage a currency hammered by weak oil prices. The central bank devalued the currency by 8% at the end of November 2014 to try to halt the decline in foreign exchange reserves hit by falling oil prices.
Slump in the oil price, in my opinion, yes, it will hit us in terms of revenues because we know 70–80% of government revenue is based on crude. But also we also look at the other side. The drop in price means that we also import refined PMS. So of course the price that the money we have to spend on subsidies to get these refined products in also goes down because the price in the international market has gone up.
Nigeria's economic woes also trickled down to some of the country's biggest firms, including Nestle, which saw its capital expenditure slow to its lowest level in 5 years. As a result, this saw currency devaluation, dampening customer spending.
I think overall the consumer sentiment is definitely much lower. So confidence in the market is lower. So if you look at our customers' confidence, it's certainly being impacted by the challenges that we face in Nigeria. The challenges are many. And yes, it's all about the oil price, and yes, it's about the currency, it's about the uncertainty of the economic climate now.
In nearby Ghana, once hailed the most attractive country in Africa for investors because of its stable democracy and middle-income status, a struggling economy saw recurring nationwide protests against what Ghanaians say was the government's mishandling of the economy. Ghana's government and the International Monetary Fund signed a 3-year funding deal worth $940 million that led to hopes of restoring fiscal stability.
The original source of our problems has been lack of discipline in economic management. In other words, that hyper expenditures, extra budgetary expenditures, all those things, single sourcing without going through the procurement law and all that has brought us to this stage. What the IMF intervention is doing basically is to help to instill discipline in the management of the finances of this economy so that things can be stabilized for private enterprise to boom and pick up.
But it was not all gloom for the continent. In June, representatives from 25 African nations signed an initial agreement to create a free trade zone linking 3 economic blocs that would unite 57% of the continent's population. The deal also intends to reduce trade barriers that will bring down prices and boost economic activities between African countries, which has long been hampered by many factors, including poor infrastructure. Although analysts say that the agreement looks like a progressive step on paper, they are skeptical of its success, as it would require negotiations and ratification by national parliaments.
The challenges are that it is a very bureaucratic system. These countries, some of them are Arabic speaking, some of them are English speaking, some of them are French speaking. They cut across, the infrastructure doesn't support or facilitate this, because you cannot drive a car or enter a train from Cairo to Cape Town, right? So it's a very, very elegant concept, but it's going to take a long time to accomplish, and not to talk of when you see the benefits. The benefits take much longer to accrue to the participating countries.
In Southern Africa, Zimbabwe's crumbling economy was dealt a new blow when the International Monetary Fund announced that the economy would weaken further after growing by 3.1%. The government forecast growth this year of 3.2%, but analysts say weak commodity prices, patchy rainfall and company closures as a result of cheap imports and high interest rates could curtail the economy's growth.
The economic outlook, we have to say, remains difficult. The external position is precarious and the country is in debt distress. Growth has slowed down, it's likely to weaken further.
Zimbabwe's foreign debt is $9 billion. It makes a token monthly payment of $150,000 to clear $125 million in IMF arrears. To make matters worse, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe announced in June the beginning of the process of demonetizing the Zimbabwean dollar and started collecting old currency notes from the public. The unloved Zimbabwean dollar, ravaged by hyperinflation that peaked at 500% billion in 2008, ceased to be a legal tender on Friday, June 12, as the southern African country switched fully to the US dollar.
A lot of people were quite very aggrieved, as they felt they'd lost a lot of money after we had converted in February of 2009 into US dollar terms. So as a Chamber of Commerce, we believe this could be a right move for the government in trying to restore sanity, not only in the financial sector, but also the real sector economy.
In Eastern Africa, one of the continent's biggest airlines faced uncertainty when Kenyan Airways announced plans to sell off part of its old fleet and some land to see the national carrier through a cash crisis caused by a drop in passenger numbers. But CEO Ngunze remains optimistic about the carrier's future despite the challenges.
Today we are focused on making sure that, one, that we are commercially and financially efficient, and that's why we are focusing on the commercial side of the business to make sure we are taking all the opportunity we can, even in a difficult commercial space with security concerns around us.
But for Kenya's biggest telecoms operator, Safaricom, business went from strength to strength. It announced a push to expand its mobile financial services and internet access as the next big areas of growth after calls as it builds up its 3G and 4G network.
Customers' needs are changing rapidly. Customers' behavior is changing rapidly. You know, at the beginning of last year, if you'd asked me when exactly would we roll out 4G and how quickly would we do it, I wouldn't have been able to say to you that by the end of the financial year, which was end of March, we would have rolled out 230-something LTE base stations.
In neighboring Ethiopia, Heineken looked up to the country's rising incomes to fuel rapid expansion of the beer market in Africa's second most populous country, where the group is the first of the big international brewers to build a new plant. Ethiopia's average annual beer consumption of some 5 liters per capita is about half the average level of the sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa, offering scope for expansion among the population.
At the moment we are developing our position in the local market. Like I said, our first priority is to become a national player, fulfill our ambition to become a national player all over Ethiopia. That's our first priority. Export also has to do a lot with the supply chain. In order to be able to export, you have to have a supply chain adapted to the export markets.
Staying in Ethiopia, according to COMSA's Leather and Leather Products Institute, vast wealth of livestock resources means Africa has enormous potential in the leather sector, but studies show that only a fraction of the resource is being leveraged. African countries have been challenged to step in and exploit the emerging opportunities for export as part of efforts to move away from largely agriculture-based economies.
Right now, Africa is waiting to be the next giant after India. And India has just heightened its targets. But one thing that comes out very, very clearly is that the targets set by India is also sending the information to Africa that we are now ready to start cooperating with them because they don't have the resource, they don't have the raw material that can push them from $13 billion to $27 billion which they aim to have in the next 5 to 10 years.
According to the African Development Bank, African economies will grow 5% in 2016, approaching levels last seen before the 2007 global financial crisis as economic prospects improve worldwide.
We will go on another quick break. When we come back, tours aim at one of Indonesia's most famous volcanoes slowed down after weeks of active volcanic activity. Do stay with us.